different views of the people on this call. 25, so it's more than 100 people. But give me time. Limit your questions within, if I say a minute, I'll give you 2 if you're not finished talking. But please be aware that other people may want to say things. And I can get a hand clap or a thumbs up or something if everybody agrees to that. Thank you very much. And Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Buenas noches. I am from the indigenous people of Palestine. And I also want to acknowledge that San Francisco State University sits on the indigenous, stolen, occupied people of the Ohlone nation. I also come from the Palestinian tradition of honoring people who are steadfast, who have fallen for all our struggles, for justice for all, whether it is for Black lives, indigenous lives, Palestinian lives, anywhere around the world, and anywhere here, including people who have also fought for the poor and the wretched of the earth. Third, I want to also register, and I'll speak about that I am very uneasy and uncomfortable with doing this call on Zoom. And I think it's a very problematic, not only because Zoom censored our open classroom, and I'll speak a little bit about that on September 23rd, but also because Zoom actually now, as a multinational corporation, one of the tech giants in Silicon Valley, has actually almost now, if we don't stop it, will have veto power over what content of the classroom, what are we doing, where are we, and that should be held, they should be held accountable, and we're actually trying to hold them accountable. We can speak about that a little bit later. In preparation for today, I want to thank you all for inviting me. In preparation for today, I actually went and did some archival research about Pacifica. And I found on the official website of Pacifica, it says that only one mention of Palestine, 1988, and I'll read what was said. In 1998, Pacifica stringers provided on-the-spot coverage of the Intifada, the Palestinian uprising, despite great personal danger. I was actually a bit surprised because I know as a young activist student youth who moved to New York City in 1982, I remember almost every week speaking on Pacifica. We were hosted, not just me, many people, Palestinian Voices, Palestinian Experiences, were hosted by many people. And I think, I want to mention some of the names, specifically in WBAI in New York. I want to mention Samori Marksman, Ilan Bebrath, Valerie Van Isler, Valerie Van Isler. I actually wrote the names down. Let me just, I think I'm going to the international before I go here. Bernard White, Rosemary Mealy. There were so many people that actually, if I'm going to mention, and now also Mimi Rosenberg, also in KPFA in California, there is Steve Zeltzer, there is Kate Raphael, Sabrina Jones. There is many people around. I know most people in New York. And I was wondering, why is that the case? Why is there's mention, there is actually a very interesting history of Pacifica that has stood against Mccarthyism, has stood against the war in Vietnam and so on. So I also learned a lot more than I knew. And I think part of that has to do with the project that I'm doing. And somebody said to say who I am. I'm actually the director and senior scholar of the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies at San Francisco State University, which is actually a program that, despite Zionist attacks and despite neoliberalism and Christian Zionists and so on, who try to stop the program and attack us, actually we do have a program. We have an academic minor, we have 22 courses that all fulfill general education courses such as Islamophobia, Palestine, colonialism, imperialism and resistance, comparative border studies, Palestine and Mexico, gender and modernity and American communities, and so on and so forth. I can actually share some more as we go along. And the program also, we have Edward Said Scholarship, which we set it up. We have the only agreement that San Francisco has with any university in Arab or Muslim communities, that is with Najah National University in Palestine, that also the Zionist forces have been trying to shut down. We also do open classrooms constantly, and this is also one of the things that have been the webinar on September 23rd, open conversation with Layla Khalid on Palestinian narratives, along with anti-apartheid activist Roni Kasril, who's an anti-Zionist, former commander of the ANC, Laura Whitehorn, who's an anti-Zionist Jewish activist, and former prisoner Seko Odinga from Black Liberation Movement, a Black Panther Party initially, who was also actually joined with Malcolm X organization before Malcolm was assassinated. And also the last person was the director of the Institute for Women's Studies at Birzeit University, Rula Abu Daha, which is actually one of the most important institutions for women and feminists and women's liberation, women's studies throughout the region, that combines, as we do, scholarship with activism, with community engagement, with accountability for the community. And so I was trying to find out, well, this is part of the reason why I was trying to find out what's going on, what's the history there. And we have a project called Teaching Palestine that also Zionist groups have actually sought to silence and censor. And this, the Teaching Palestine brings about the histories of Palestine with the histories of struggle here in the US. So we actually started officially in this project in 1968, looking at 50 years, 2018, 2017, 2018, looking at the history of Palestine. This was the 100th year of struggle against colonialism since the Balfour Declaration. This is also was the 70th anniversary of the Palestinian displacement, Nakba, on May 15th, 1948, the history of the UN partition of Palestine, which in 1977 becomes the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, and so on and so forth. Here in the US, this was the history of the San Francisco State strike, student strike, led by the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front, along with a very broad network. Hundreds of students were arrested. They fought for what became later the College of Ethnic Studies, and they actually wanted a College of Third World Studies. We can talk about that history maybe some other time. But this is really very important. So we were trying to actually bring histories together in order for people to be able to compare points in history and not say something happened here in the US that's different than what happened in Palestine. And each single history actually separated from each other, including the history, long history. And I think this is one of the topics that we're focusing on, the long history against anti-Semitism and the long history against Zionism. And we don't see the contradiction between, we see actually the struggle against anti-Semitism to be very much connected to the struggle against Zionism and against the settler colonial projects, both in the United States, that's feeding white supremacy, that produced the almost coup d'etat on Wednesday, which we can talk more about that, and that also has produced what Israel is doing in Palestine as well. And one of the issues, one of the purposes that the Zionist movement, along with their supporters, whether you're talking about the president who's still in the White House, many members of Congress, the financial, some of the financial, especially Zionists and Christian Zionists, which Trump has been satisfying their interest, the white supremacist groups and so on, have tried, in alliance with the Israeli government, have consistently tried historically to silence anything about Palestine. And increasingly, the attacks have gotten much and much more vicious, precisely because Israel has been unable to crush the Palestinian people, has been, despite all the attacks, despite racism, colonialism, and so on, has been unable to do it. So its supporters in the US, this is what I call the Israel lobby industry. And I call it industry specifically for a reason, because it is actually an industry that is trying to crush everybody who speaks, teaches, advocates around justice for Palestine, as part and parcel of the indivisibility of justice, precisely so people would not understand what's going on and completely silence this struggle. And under the various pretexts, one of them is actually accusing us of anti-Semitism. But I mean, when I say us, I'm not just talking about Palestinians. I'm talking about this very broad movement that's growing more and more and more, including many of our Jewish comrades, sisters, and brothers, for whom Zionism doesn't speak. And the Zionist movement would like to say that all Jews think the same way across time and place and history and today and so on. And that in itself, actually, the stereotyping is quite problematic. And one of the questions that I raise a lot in my research is who owns Jewishness? You can't say Jews are the same, because if you actually say that, you are justifying anti-Semitism and the arguments against against anti-Semitism. The second thing that we actually emphasize a lot when we teach in our classes is the history that Zionism actually is a passing phenomena. Zionism came after many voices have been actually theorizing and thinking about how do we get rid of anti-Semitism? How do we struggle against it? Many of the big names that people know about and cite, Marx, we talk about the Bunds, we talk about many also survivors of the Holocaust who've actually spoke again and again, continue to speak today about that. And in that sense also, the Zionist movement is failing to speak in the name of all Jews and to also sway people in the United States, which is, you know, unusual, because the United States, you think that the United States should, because of the government and because this is the settler colonial state, this is the imperialist #1 country and so on, what we saw what happened on Wednesday, should actually be supportive of Israel. Except that public opinion is actually changing more and more and more, including many younger people, including many younger Jewish people who are also saying Israel doesn't speak in my name, the Zionist movement doesn't speak in my name. So they're getting nastier. Bullies always do that. Bullies get nastier and nastier. And one of the main sites of these attacks are on university campuses, because there is a attack by the right wing to regain what they have lost in the 60s movements, to kind of this started this actually the whole, like the emphasized effort would start with Reagan, even though it has already has happened before with Mccarthyism, has happened with the silencing of the COINTELPRO movement, has been the attacks against movement for Black Lives, have been against indigenous people, everybody who's actually fighting for their land, fighting for their rights, fighting for their freedoms. And we know how many people are in prison, how many people are prosecuted, and we know the different treatment, the disparate treatment, which I think to many people who are probably tuning into there is not something unusual. I mean, I think we know about that, but this is happening in the case of Palestine because I mentioned the first accusation is anti-Semitism, smearing and defaming us as anti-Semitic in order for us to be dismissed. And we know that the struggle against anti-Semitism is serious today. Not only serious because the 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust and because the Nazism was going to take over the world, if there weren't actually many other people, including 20,000 Soviets, by the way, who also died in that and fought against it. And so the Nazism was actually trying racist settler colonial project. And it's not surprising that Miller from Chicago, the congressman, actually got up and quoted Hitler. I don't think it's surprising that people were wearing T-shirts for Auschwitz and so on, and also were carrying Israeli flags in the almost coup d'etat in Washington, and it's not surprising how they were treated and so on. But that's one of the first things that we get attacked over is the whole question of anti-Semitism in order for us to be dismissed, so people do not listen to us. The second aspect of it is accusations of terrorism, which also happened in the webinar on September 23rd. And this is also draws into historical US accusing anybody who's fighting for their freedom. I mean, Nelson Mandela, everybody knows, in 1994, stopped being on the terrorist list of the United States government. Many people who are fighting, people were writing in the chat, many people who were fighting have been also accused of terrorism. But this also picked up more after 9/11, 2001, because it was a discourse that people, let's say, maybe mainstream or the status quo in the US could actually relate to and say, for Israel to say, see, this is the same that you are facing. And so becomes very easy to accuse Palestinians, Arabs as Muslims as terrorists in order to also dismiss and say, these are just a bunch of crazy people. They have nothing to be fighting over. The only reason that they're doing this is because they hate Jews. And we know this is not the case. And we know that the history of anti-Zionism is a very, very long history, and there is many, many groups in that. Well, we can discuss that further. This is the second aspect of it. The third aspect is actually using Islamophobia, because again, the minute you say Muslims, it goes into the racist, white supremacist, Islamophobic minds and so on to call on that and do it. So they mention all of these things, and the attack take multiple forms, from defamation and smearing to actual strict death threats, to having people lose their jobs. Professor Stephen Salaita at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign actually was fired by the provost of his university because he tweeted during the Israeli war on Gaza in 2014. He tweeted on his personal tweet criticizing the Israeli government. So he actually was fired. And afterwards, we realized that the chancellor, the chair of the board of trustees, and so on, have very close interests and connections with the Zionists and pro-Israeli group. We also have the Christian Zionists, of course, are very much interested in that, because now for them, is something that is very, very important, even though they're actually anti-Semitic. I mean, they would like to actually to have Israel rise and for Israel to be destroyed, for the Jews to be destroyed, for them to declare the arrival of the Messiah. So it's not really against anti-Semitism. So it's kind of like when you bring in white supremacy, Zionism, and anti-Semitism together. I was actually just surprised that there were so many overt expressions. Not that they're overt expressions, because it has happened many times. Netanyahu's son in 2000 during Charlottesville said that leftists and Antifa are more dangerous than Nazis to Jews and Israel. Richard Spencer, one of the main organizers, white supremacists, said that I'm a white Zionist. All of these things exist. There is actually a purpose. There is an ideological purpose of that. And then what they do also on top of it, in addition to smearing and so on, there is also threat of the jobs, as I mentioned with Professor Stephen Salata. There is what we call and what I call the new Mccarthyism, the ways in which you scare tactics, scare people, threaten them at their jobs, threaten colleagues so they do not actually align with them and work with them and so on, keep them away. So those of us who are speaking up more overtly and advocating and teaching and doing scholarship become seen as radioactive, just what happened with McCarthyism. We also have the death threats. We have the things like the Canary Mission that actually extorts and names people so they would lose their jobs. So students who are active on campuses might go seek employment, and then if their employers look at their names and so on, they don't give them jobs and so on. We also have threats on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere that threaten students and scholars who are active, but all sorts of things, including threatening them that when you go there, when you're at the checkpoint in the West Bank and so on, it might be the soldier standing there, knows who you are, so watch out what you are saying. So there is an attempt continuously to silence, to shut down and so on. Then we also have faced death threats. I have multiple examples that I'm not happy to share, but I can share. Whether it is sound, whether it's letters that we've received and so on. There is also lawsuits that they've sued us, a group called Lawfare Project, which is a right-wing, calls itself the pro-Israel arm of the legal community, actually sued us and failed big time. We defeated them big time, and they even in federal courts, and we know that courts are not always necessarily pro-Palestinian or support Palestine, but we did because they were actually filing frivolous lawsuits, again, to increase this. We've had posters by the David Horowitz put up against 10 campuses, including our own campus, of me and my students and other colleagues of ours and so on. There is continuous this, and then also this is in direct collaboration with the Israeli government. For example, the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs in silencing our webinar, which was silenced by Zoom and then also shut down by Facebook and by YouTube. It's called Act IL. They prided themselves that they sent 19,000 messages to Facebook and YouTube saying that this is against community standards, that basically shut us down as well as Zoom. Why is that happening? I think it's really, really important to say, why is this happening? It's happening, as I said first, because they're failing to crush the voices of Palestine. It's happening because they have a serious problem, and I'm talking about the pro-Israel groups, which the pro-Israel lobby industry that includes all of these groups that I spoke about, because they would like people not to be able to hear about Palestine, which I was speaking about. First is that kind of like the history is not even there. So what does it really mean to actually have Palestine always being discussed? So we don't really have to start the history from zero, from scratch, but we build on what is going on. So people understand what is happening and why we don't really need to kind of go over all this historical. Talk about what's going on now. Talk about the prisoners who are not getting treatment for COVID in Israeli jails. Talk about Israeli guards who are actually infecting them. Talk about what's happening at the borders. Talk about the silencing of people, cutting the electricity of Gaza, refusing to allow supplies, etc., so on and so forth. So this is the second. The third aspect of it is that there is a direct collusion between the Zionist industry, as well as, of course, I mentioned already the White House and the ways in which Trump, for example, executive order, quote unquote, against anti-Semitism, equates the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel, which is very similar to the boycotts of the civil rights movement here, to the boycotts of the anti-apartheid movement, to boycotts around the world. This is not something, it's not a new strategy, but the Zionists try to exceptionalize Palestine and set it aside from everything else. So people don't say, this is not really like every other movement seeking freedom and justice and so on. But there is also part of the reason that it's working on campuses, on some of the campuses, like my own campus, San Francisco State University, because whereas this used to be a public university, part of the California State University, 23 campuses, the largest public system in the United States, used to be completely public and accountable to the public. Now, a lot of the funding, I think 2/3, comes from private sources. When funding comes from private sources, the university is more accountable to the donors than it is accountable to the public. Not only that, we don't get to know who donated, where is the money going, what's the money trail, what is happening, and so on. We do not know. We have no way of knowing because it goes through something called university corporation. The university corporation funnels the private money. So for example, on the day on which our university president, President Mahoney, issued her second, she issued 3 statements against the webinar we're doing. She claimed that she was for academic freedom and freedom of speech, but at the same time, she engages in condemning Palestinian resistance, calling everything violence, saying that she condemns people who glorify violence, which is the same charges the Zionist groups waged against me and my colleague Tomomi Kanekawa, that we 2 organizers of the class. On the day she issued the public op-ed in one of the main Zionist newsletters in the San Francisco Bay Area, Jewish Community Relations Council. She published an op-ed in J Weekly in which she changed even the letter she wrote to the university campus, where she said, I'm against anti-Blackness, I'm against anti-Semitism, I'm against Islamophobia. In her letter to J Weekly, the op-ed, she removed anti-Blackness, she removed Islamophobia, and she only kept anti-Semitism. And then her discourse equates being anti-Zionist with being anti-Semitic. Again, reproduces the same thing and so on. On the same day she did that, she received a letter of congratulation from the main person who conducts the fundraising for the Jewish Federation of San Francisco, which everybody knows. It's been already exposed in the forward in many Jewish organizations that they are actually funding David Horowitz, The Turning Point, Campus Watch, all these right-wing groups who are actually quite racist. I mean, they've been already identified as Islamophobic and racist and so on. And they're also identified as right-wing groups. So the same day she was congratulated with that, because San Francisco State receives a lot of money from Zionist donors who also tell San Francisco State what they would like to see, what they wouldn't like to see. And we have, I mean, I'm more than happy to share more evidence of that. So there is a very strong attempt. And part of the last point I would say, and it was a quote in this context, a quote from the executive director of the Zionist group, the Lawfare Project, her name is Book Goldstein. In 2016, she said that we're going to inflict massive punishment on people who advocate for Palestine. We are going to exact a heavy price. She said that in 2016. In 2017, they sued us. And that's the lawsuit we defeated. This is the group, one of the groups that spearheaded the attack against the webinar. And she said in an interview with NPR, there was, I was also interviewed on that show. She said that, oh, Layla Khaled wants to speak, she can speak, but we're not going to allow it to be part of the academic curriculum. Part of that is because, as you know, there is a big battle in the academy about being able to present issues around justice, being able to present the history of people's struggle, being able to change the curriculum, some of which were represented in 1968 Black Student Union Third World Liberation Front at San Francisco State University. And all of the intention was and continues to be decolonizing the curriculum. How do we teach our students? How do we offer them all the knowledge that's out there, including right-wing knowledge, in order for them to be able to learn about it? The battle, and I think, I don't know if people are following what's happening in California, there is a very strong movement by the Zionist groups to block any kind of ethnic studies curriculum, that the model curriculum for the California schools for K-12, the AB 1460, which is the Congress in a bill in the California legislature that calls on every student to take 3 credits in ethnic studies before they graduate. The Zionist movement has been trying very strongly to evacuate any discussions around Palestine, any discussions about Arab American history, any discussions on Islamophobia, including some of the hip hop that you saw, Shadia Mansour, but there is another group and so on that teach, because students relate to this kind of like genre and culture that is going on there. So there is a very, very strong attempt to silence completely, to erase Palestine from the curriculum, the same way that historically the curriculum in the US against which the students struck has erased the history of indigenous people, the history of the American Indian movement, Black Panthers, the Puerto Rican movement, the movements of the Philippines, the settler colonialism in Cuba, in South Africa, and so on. People didn't really know about it. There was change in the curriculum to include that so students can understand what's going on. And today, with movement for Black lives, with movements against police brutality and so on, there is a very strong identification by many people who are opposing police brutality, who are opposing the criminalization of people who are struggling for their rights and for their freedoms in the United States, with connections with people in Palestine, with people around the world. So there is a very strong attempt to silence that, to shut that down, because if you shut it down, you don't allow it, and you criminalize any discussions of Palestine, then people won't hear about it. And this is why I think it's really, really important for us to think about what does it mean then to have actually consistent journalism? What does it mean to kind of like stop exceptionalizing Palestine and thinking that Palestine is different than any other struggle? What does it mean to kind of like challenge the contradictions in the peace and justice movement? There is a lot of advances people have made throughout, but there is a very consistent attempt. For example, how much time do I have? I just want to say, do I have like 2 more minutes?
Yes, Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, go ahead. 2 minutes is perfect.
So I would like really to leave space for us to have discussions and so on, but I think it's really, really important. For example, they tried to Campus Watch, which was founded by Daniel Pipes and now is led by a couple of other people who are always making it a hobby to continue to attack us and so on. They've targeted our collaboration with An-Najah National University in Palestine by saying Palestinian universities are terrorist universities. And they quote the Anti-Defamation League and other groups who have been, many people in the movement have already said, you need to drop the Anti-Defamation League, because Anti-Defamation League not only has spied on movements throughout from the 60s, NAACP, Asian Legal Fund, Arab Americans, and so on and so forth, but also is one of the main architects of something called the Deadly Exchange, of organizing the collaboration between US police and military tools with the Israeli military and the US police. So there is a very important interest for the Zionist movement not to allow people to think about the similarities. Not everything is exactly the same, but to think about what's happening with the prisons. What is happening with the people who are calling for their own rights, for housing, for healthcare, for food, for jobs, for kids to go to school and not to get arrested. I mean, Palestinian students are arrested and locked in prison. And there is a lot of discussion around it, from Ad-Damir, which is a Palestinian prisoner group, to DCI, Defense of Children International. There are Betty McCollum in the Congress have been actually speaking about that, and no way to treat a child and so on. So they would like to actually stop any of this. So what I am saying basically is that what is going on now is not accidental. It's not accidental what is happening. It's not isolated, these attacks that are against us. It is part and parcel of the US history of repression, starting with the US settler colonial state setting it up. It is very much connected with what's happening in the US, in the White House, and so on and so forth. And it's also intended in order to prevent people to learn about what's going on and to silence that again and again and again. From our part, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue doing it. We have a lot of support. Our unions, my union at San Francisco State University, California Faculty Union, has been amazingly supportive. We also have a lot of labor support in many, including San Francisco Labor Council, by the way. And also recently, the CUNY, City University of New York Union, PSC, Professional Staff Congress, actually also voted on a resolution in terms of support of academic freedom and support of what we were doing at San Francisco State. And now we also submitted a claim to CSU and SFSU, telling them that we believe that they were complicit in silencing us with the webinar on September 23rd. And we would like them to be held accountable. We want to be able to do the webinar again. We want to be able to honor our speaker. And the thing, this was open classroom. This is an open classroom that brought 6 classes together. And so by silencing it, they're trying to control the curriculum. And we're saying we're not going to allow that to happen. We're going to fight for it. And because it is our responsibility to fight for justice for in Palestine, the way we fight for justice for all. This is the webinar, the Open Classroom was actually part of a webinar series where we've done many webinars throughout the summer, where we brought speakers to speak about Black liberation, Black lives, abolition and resistance, and abolition and reparations. And we've hosted many people, former prisoners. We've been working with people day in and day out in order for us to actually link how important it is to teach about the indivisibility of justice. That being inspired by Martin Luther King, saying that if there is a threat to justice anywhere, is threat to justice everywhere, and injustice anywhere. And Bishop Tutu, who said that complicity, neutrality is complicity. If there is something wrong, you have to speak up against it, and so on. So we believe that this is something that should not only be outside in the streets, should not be out in only public space. It should be also in the classroom. The classroom is not immune. The classroom is part and parcel of this. Our students deserve, especially students at public universities, where they never get to see, big shot people and so on, are able to actually converse and speak to people day in and day out and learn. And then they can make their minds whether they actually want to support that or they don't want to support that. But we are committed to what we call justice-centered knowledge production. This is what we want to teach. I went to the academy. Many of my colleagues went to the academy because this is like, you don't really become rich and famous if you're a professor. We do that because we believe that this is our responsibility. This is where we need to bring in, we need to teach about justice, not to teach about how to make weapons, how to kill people, how to prevent people from crossing and being unified with families and so on. This is what we really want to do. This is our project. This is what we are doing. And this is how we are continuing what we are doing. We have multiple webinars coming up. Please check, and I would post it, our Ahmed Facebook page. We can't do it too much at the university because the university does not really give us any support. The program started with 3 faculty members, and now I'm the only faculty member. The program, the classes, we're supposed to have 8 classes now. They reduced them to 4. Now they're trying to reduce them to 3 classes. So every single time there is this institutionalization that the Zionist movement is trying to stop, and that San Francisco State Administration is part and parcel with it. But thankfully, we do have a lot of support but we really need to kind of make that more consistent. And we would like to see more responsible journalism that actually covers Palestine the way it covers everything else, does not exceptionalize Palestine, does not leave it out of the equation. Thank you.
Shukran, Professor Abdulhadi. I got a chance to spend a little time in the Middle East. I went to Jordan and was unable to get into Israel. I just wanted to say this, that a group of Black Lives Matter students went to Israel at Israel's request. And I got a phone call from a friend, a Jewish friend, who is occupying Israel, who asked me why the Black Lives Matter were talking about the Palestinian problems, and that they were really upset with not being told the truth. And I think that we're talking truth now. So I'd like to open it up. One of the suggestions is to put your question in the chat, but I don't think that will work as well as holding up your hand. If your face is showing, I can see you. I am ready, and so is the professor, to entertain any comments or questions. Michael?
Yeah, there's been some discussion in the chat about, what does it have to do with Pacifica? And I think that this is a really vital question for Pacifica, because I think it is a divisive question within the progressive movement. I think that it's really, really important for Pacifica to be open to the Palestinian perspectives and opposed to the false use of a charge of anti-Semitism to censor and shut people down. And I think that, Lawrence mentioned he's a representative of his union. I was also a shop steward for United Teachers Los Angeles. We had an incident a number of years ago in UTLA where the Human Rights Committee of UTLA attempted just to hold a discussion of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, not even to, specifically take a position on it or have the union take a position on it. And the whole thing was shut down by the leadership of the union and by really a very, very strong attack from the pro-Zionist movement in the United States, claiming that this was anti-Semitic to even talk about the question of BDS. And I think the same thing happens. It's happened repeatedly at KPFK, that false charge of anti-Semitism has been used to purge and ban, particularly programmers of color, Didan Kamathi and other people, other Black programmers at KPFK. There was a Black Chicano show that was taken off the air. And so I think that this is really a vital question for Pacifica and Pacificans to address and to think about in terms of really what it means to be a free speech radio station and to resist, corporate domination. So I just wanted to share that, and if the professor wants to comment at all on, Pacifica's role that we could be playing and or not playing in challenging, some of the censorship, I appreciate it.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to say anything,
Professor,
TK?
and then Steve. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I
well-
will say a couple of things. One is that, I see Steve here. Two things I will say. One is that I think you are absolutely right about what's going on. I don't know what's going on today at UCLA, but I do know that I gave a lecture in May 2019 in a class of a professor on Islamophobia, where I drew connection between white supremacy and Zionism. And and actually my lecture is online. It's available online. The whole lecture, we streamed it live, all of it available. And then the Zionist press actually accused me of silencing the students. And they're the ones who were silencing me. They were yelling, they were drowning my voice and so on and so forth. And then today, when people see what's going on and they see the Israeli flags that were part of, this attempted coup, or anyway, whatever you want to say, the white supremacists, the white privilege, white power, in Washington. I mean, to me, it's actually follows a specific history, but what happened afterwards, UCLA actually, instead of apologizing to me, UCLA went and investigated based on a Zionist claim that wasn't really true, because everything is available out there. They could have seen it. Now, a Zionist group, Stand With Us, went and filed a complaint with the Department of Education against UCLA over my lecture and over the fact that UCLA hosted the Conference of the National Students for Justice in Palestine. That was the right of the students to, I attended it. I was one of the keynotes there, but we saw how many people from the Jewish Defense League are standing there with signs against us. How it was really scary. A lot of Palestinian students had to cover their faces because some of them have to go back home and so on. The second aspect of it is, I think, this whole question of presenting it as divisive. And I think this is the crux of the matter. Why is Palestine seen as divisive? This is historically, and this is why I was actually shocked, because to me, WBI has always been our home. I'm honestly, like, a lot of the times we will all talk with each other and try to find out who's going to go on this show, who's going to be on Samori Marksman's show on the Cold War or an economic thing. They Michu Kaku will get in there. Doug Howard, they have everybody. And we were, when you talk about Grenada, you talk about, because the invasion of Grenada happened right after the Israeli invasion of Beirut in 1982. When you talk about Haiti and Tonton Macoute, who were the death squad who were trained by the Israeli government. You're talking about FDR, FML, and Salvador. You talk about Nicaragua, the death squads, the Israeli connections there. And it's not surprising. You're not picking on Israel. If Israel behaves like any other state, nobody will be calling for sanctions and holding Israel accountable. You act accountably, you get held accountable. You don't, you need to have sanctions. The same thing as South Africa, same thing as anybody else. You either abide or you don't abide. And so, but the ways in which to deflect, instead of saying, yes, we're going to actually try to even convince Israeli leaders, however you think about, Israeli settler colonial project, and I'm anti-Zionist, 100% anti-Zionist. I'm 100% for BDS. Everybody knows that. I'm not giving any, like, revealing secrets or whatever. They know exactly where I stand and so on. But whatever you say, why aren't they going and saying to the Israeli government, stop blockading Gaza, stop arresting people, stop preventing prisoners to have a treatment of COVID, stop doing it. They're actually encouraging Israel more and more and more. And I think today, maybe it's not really surprising given what we're seeing in Washington. So I think one of the major issues now is not only about free speech and being able to speak, but also what is it that's being silenced? So when they talk even about free speech, whose free speech is being silent? And how is free speech, like the posters that Horowitz put against us 4 times on campus, 4 times, okay? They said, oh, this is free speech. We say you're weaponizing free speech as an incitement to violence. Now everybody's talking about Washington, but when it was happening to us, it wasn't being seen. And I'm happy that it's being talked about today because you want to raise consciousness, that's okay. But I think you really need to apply the question of justice to everybody equally. You can't apply justice somewhere and say, oh, we want to support justice for Palestine, but we're actually against talking about freedom for people who are Leonard Peltier or Mumia Abu Jamal or other prisoners. So you can't say that. It doesn't really work. There is no credibility. There is no credibility or any moral or ethical responsibility. Nobody's going to believe you. There is no credibility. If you're going to say these people deserve it, but those don't, you have to have justice for all. You have to speak about all human life should be worth the same. Palestinian human life should not be worth less, or Black life should not be worth less than Israeli, Ashkenazi life, or white lives in the U.S. I mean, all lives, and I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not responding to Black lives by all lives. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that all lives will matter when Black lives matter. I mean, this is
that's my favorite saying. I just wanted to say for those that are on the phone, if you do *9, it raises your hand, and I'm happy to respond to you. Steve is on the stack, and then Lawrence. Like I said, again, thank you so much for what you just said. Steve?
Yeah, well, I want to thank Rabab for being here, because her story is not just about her. It's what's going on to people all over the world. The banning of her program by Facebook, Zoom, and YouTube is a threat to everyone. It's a threat to all people around the world who are using these systems. And one thing we should know about Facebook, they hired people from the Israeli government to censor and sanitize Facebook. Now, one of the concerns I have about Pacifica, for example, there have been programs on KPFA, but I don't think that she's really been, the whole issue of the censorship and a threat to free speech and the right of people to get their voices out has been taken up in a serious way. And I think Pacifica needs to take it up. And there's a program on KPFA, Voices from the Middle East and North Africa. I don't think Rabab has been invited on. And this is
a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. This isn't just about, again, this is not just about Palestinian issues and the Palestinian people, it's about American people. Whether American people are going to have the right to hear the voices of Palestinians and the critiques, those who are critical of Zionism in the United States. And it is being, they're also an international effort to say that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And they're putting that into law in countries. And that's come into the United States. There have been dozens and dozens of professors who've been kicked out of their jobs, as Rabab reported, because they were critical of Israel for its treatment of Palestinians. This is a threat to free speech, democratic rights. And the good thing in her case is that the unions, California Federation of California Faculty Association, the Labor Council have supported her. So the labor movement has to get behind defending democratic rights, defending Palestinian professors, and I think it's horrendous that the students, and I am from San Francisco State, were actually have been attacked as terrorists. And there have been a campaign of Facebook and posters on the campus saying that the Palestinian students were terrorists. These are terror tactics used by the Zionists against critics of Israel who are speaking up for the Palestinians.
Thank you, Steve. Lawrence?
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I am a union man, And one of the things that my union attempted to do was to divest from the buses that were being used because my pension monies were invested in those in that stock. And so I told them I don't want blood on my pension. I want to be able to live a peaceful life when I retire. So now the reason why your presentation has everything to do with Pacifica, because recently there was an email blast that was sent out by Sonali Koharkar and New Day Pacifica, the people that want to break us up, break up the network, attacking Workers' World, and attacking Workers' World and attacking me as a result of that and calling me a communist. Now, I don't have a problem being a communist. I really don't. But the point is this, is that they use that email as a narrative. Rosie, you need to mute yourself, please. They use that as a narrative to talk about this whole idea of Workers' World being anti-Semitic, and that Workers' World wanted to take over the Pacifica Foundation. So this is Sonali and Ian Masters from KPFK. And the reason I'm calling them out, because this was a public thing, and you need to know about the kind of shenanigans and the kind of red baiting and the kind of Islamophobia that they engage in, and the anti-Palestinian narrative that they are promoting. These people are red baiters. These people are really terrible, and they have used a platform on KPFK to sprout this propaganda, this misinformation propaganda in regards to that they were going to lose their jobs and all of that stuff. Now, and then they sent out a hit piece on me, and at the KPFA LSP today, Bev Keane, according to my comrade Paulina Basilia, called us communists, and that we're no good for the foundation. What kind of stuff is that to be sharing at the Pacifica kind of thing, where we are supposed to address all points of view, right? And to sort of tell people that if you're communist or an anarchist or whatever tendency that you practice, that you're not welcome in Pacifica, that is red baiting. That is completely red baiting to the point where it's not okay, and people should hold those people accountable. That's all I'm saying. Thank you, and I thank you.
If I may, I'm gonna say maybe a couple of things about that. One is that yes, there is actually a movement within the labor movement that actually says that there needs to be divestment. I think it's $5 billion of union pension in Israeli bonds. And without actually the question, this is also about democratization, because union members should be able to vote whether they would like their money to be invested in Israeli bonds that supports the Israeli government, and whereby the quote unquote main Israeli union, the Histadrut, is actually a part of the government, right, and cuts down the dues of the Palestinian workers, actually collects. I mean, there is a whole lot of research about that you can talk to multiple Palestinian labor. So that's one thing that's actually there that really needs much more education, much more knowledge about it, much more discussion. One of the highlights of the labor movement around Palestine and so on, where the electric workers were also been attacked and sued, and the lawsuits failed by the Zionist group. By the way, all of these attacks, they fail. They fail, and we prove again and again and again that there is no foundation. It doesn't matter. They keep creating noise because they have the money and they have the resources to do so. But there is something that there is also the ILWU, which I think Steve belongs to, the Longshoremen Union in San Francisco. That was the first union that refused to unload the South African ships during apartheid, and they also were the first ones that refused to upload the Israeli Zim lines twice, 2 times in the history, and would not cross the picket line of people in the community who are organizing. So we see several places where there is unions in universities that are saying this is not okay. So this stuff is improving, and this is also all these scare tactics. And then I'm going to talk to move to your next point around McCarthyism. I mean, haven't we seen this in the 50s? Haven't we seen red baiting? Haven't we seen trying to criminalize people based on their political beliefs and their agreements and their thoughts and what they are doing? What are we doing today? Saying the same thing and repeating the words that maybe somebody like Trump is saying, oh, it's the left is the problem, the radical left, the right wingers are saying that this is the radical left and so on, it's Antifa. I think this is really problematic. It's very, very problematic to criminalize thought. It's very problematic to try to kind of claim we are actually endangered in the university. We are under attack. There is no funding, there is no support. The university administrations are colluding with all these people day in and day out. So what is happening is that we're the ones who are targeted. And I'm saying I'm not just talking about people who are teaching, researching about Palestine, Arab, Muslim issues. No, I'm talking about anybody who's teaching around justice. There is a huge attack against it. So I think it behooves everybody who considers they are part of the progressive movement and think that they are part of the movement to change society for social justice and so on, not to really pick and choose and exceptionalize and pick on this movement or that, because this is what the Zionists say. They say it's anti-Semitic, but we know that's not the case. The reason they say it is because people are horrified at what happened in the Holocaust, and they should. And everybody should really fight against that and not allow the Nazis, not allow the white supremacists, not allow. But the thing that the reality of the matter is that Zionists are very much collaborating with these groups. They are very much. There is a very big difference between supporting, like they support Israel and they're also against the Jews. I mean, so there is, and I don't think people think this is very difficult to connect, but it's not difficult to connect. It's connected with each other because this is people who are white supremacists. This is what they would like to do. This is what they want to do. They want to control this power and so on. So it shouldn't be surprising. I think we just need to demystify and put this out there so people can understand what's going on and not really accept. We used to, when we were organizing in Palestine, and I was, when I was an organizer before I became full-time faculty and so on, and I went to get my PhD because I thought people will listen to me more if I have the R in front of my name. I mean, this is, well, with the Zionists is not working, but anyway, I mean, that's why I enjoyed learning and so on. But I remember that this is again and again and again, we were also in the movement, in the peace and justice movement, called divisive. Like, why is it divisive? The issue becomes divisive if you name it as divisive. If you say this is the issue about justice, it's not divisive. And I think this is also the main purpose of the Zionist movement, to prevent the connections. This is why, Dr. Ray, you were saying that there is the Black Lives Matter and so on. They would like to split. They have a very serious problem, the Zionists have a very serious problem because they're getting exposed for what they're trying to do. There's something wrong with any ideologies of racism and supremacy are not okay. All of them, not any one of them is okay. So they're trying to actually push against that by sugarcoating and trying to present it as if Israel is targeted. It's a small state, and it's like one of the fourth largest armies in the world. It has over 200 nuclear bombs and so on. And it's very clear that Palestinians as a people are not threatening Israel or its existence or whatever, but there is something that Israel, and this is what, by the way, the apartheid movement did until the end. The apartheid government, I was watching even documentaries about, I'm kind of like looking at the history around Mandela and around the movement and around the movement in the US and so on. So we can remember what's going on and refresh our memories. And of course, you take everything with a grain of salt to learn. And it's very similar things. Attacks against and against. The ANC has been called communist in order to discredit it, has been attacked again and again. And so this is going to continue happening. They were going to continue to be accused of terrorists. The question is that, are we going to replicate in the movement what the right wing and the Zionists are saying, or we're going to have a different position in them?
Good point, Professor. We have 3 people that are waiting to ask you a question. Polina?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rabab Abdulhadi. Very honored to have you here. I am an anti-Zionist Jew. I'm not a practicing Jew, but nevertheless, I'm Jewish by blood. I hope that I can say I can speak to the issue without being called anti-Semitic, but I doubt that, because I will be called anti-Semitic when I speak against the policies of the state of Israel. And that's the problem. Now, my question is the following. When the intelligence, the Five Eyes, the whole intelligence apparatus, the national security state, which is really a multinational security state, it has agreed on how things should go. What can we really do? I know, for instance, I was my electricity just went out, and I said, "Oh," and I said, "Thank you, boys. You're, están pisando el cable." Uh, I mean, I'm just curious. How do we fight against the monster of this size, given that both Republicans and Democrats are pretty much all in the same national security state apparatus structure? Thank you.
Should I respond or should I wait to other questions?
Yeah,
No, go ahead and respond to that.
Okay, yeah. So I think, one of the things is to be able to fight back against the silencing and the censorship. The second thing is to disentangle the question of fight against anti-Semitism, which is a fight for all of us, responsibility for all of us to fight against, from equating it with being anti-Zionism and critical of the state of Israel. And I think, maybe you don't get called anti-Semitic, but you might be called self-hating Jew. I mean, this happens all the time. And it's very, very interesting, by the way, in our case too, the attacks were very, very strong against all of us, all the academics. And they were targeting many of our Jewish colleagues, like Judith Butler. I mean, everybody, again and again and again. At some point, there was a turning point where I think the Zionist movement decided that it is more beneficial for them to pick Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian names, like my name. Campus Watch has something talks about the foreign, the dog whistle. They bring all of these things and so on, because it's easier for them to use us as a target. I have an accent. My name is Abdulhadi. It's much easier to say that than to actually target anti-Zionist Jews, but they do. I mean, they do target. They do make it harder for people to do that. And I think the way we can do it is to actually institutionally fight. One of the things that, for example, they silenced that webinar we had. Only a week later, there was a webinar on Zoom, which Leila Khalid spoke at. So so what is it? You're calling her terrorist on September 23rd, but on October 3rd, you're no longer calling her. But it is very clear that there is a very strong fight against the institutionalization. Because once we build our program, and I have to lawsuits against the university in order to fight for the program, to fight for my rights, to fight against this, because I'm not just representing myself. What I'm doing is I'm taking part of the struggle for all of us. Really, it's not really about Rabab per se. It's about the struggle for all of us. Once we are able to get back the 2 faculty lines that I negotiated when I was hired, once we're able to have the program and so on, the institutionalization is going to encourage other people to institutionalize. It's going to encourage other people to teach Palestine courses. It's going to encourage other people to connect what's going on with Palestine with other places and so on. This is a very, the mind is a very dangerous thing for the fascists and the right wing. Nazism did it. I mean, look at all the history of the US and repression and so on. You look at it and you go through the records. You go through McCarthy interrogating people. You go about, read the book of, what's his name? Navatsky, naming names. It's always about silencing, isolating, making people pay so other people will learn a lesson and never ever dare to do it. So you say, you don't want this to happen to you and so on. So people, of course, people don't want to lose their jobs. So people get afraid, they're scared tactics. But if we all fight against that, and if we all refuse to accept that, refuse the silencing, and build our institution, it's going to it was very, very difficult in 1968. Steve would tell you, and other strikers at San Francisco State would tell you how difficult it was. Now we have a college. It's very difficult at the beginning, but once you have it, and we had struggles at San Francisco State as well, including the Palestinian mural. You fight, you struggle, you win the struggle, you move on. They're going to come up with new tactics again every single time. I mean, if I tell you about all the details, people's heads will spin. How every single time they'll come up with one thing or another. I'll say no to this. They'll come up with something else. I'll say no to it. They'll come up with third person. Every single time they're coming up with something. And really, I mean, I draw strength because we have a big community. We have a big community that's broadening and broadening and broadening among all sectors of the population. Now, I think you spoke about the Congress. You spoke about what's happening between the Democrats and Republicans. Of course, I mean, there is a serious problem with the two-party system anywhere to start with. And it's also really funny that the United States is actually talking about American values when the US has intervened in every single country. They did not like the results of the elections. Every single time they don't like it, they go intervene. I mean, we have in the region for us, 1954 Iran, 1958 Jordan and Lebanon, 2007 Palestine. I mean, again and again and again, they don't like it, they intervene, and then they talk about values. What values are you talking about? What values?
I'm going to have to interrupt. We've got now still 3 people. The phone number ending in 7138. Area code 323. I'll ask you to unmute.
Okay, wait, I gotta call you back. Hello.
Hello, sorry, I had a little disruption. I wanted to say the topic's interesting. I think that at least on KPFK, there are 4 programs, people that run the programs that would be quite interested in having discussions about this. And one is Middle Eastern Focus. The other is Swana Radio. The third is the Scholars Circle with Maria Mudian. And then the fourth is Michael Slate's show on Fridays. He professes the Communist Party, and since Michael Novik had a problem, I think we need to be expressing this on KPFK. So if the guests or whoever is connected could connect with those entities on KPFK, I think you'd have a great format. And, I think it would be a very worthwhile topic to bring up and discuss in all its aspects. Okay? So
thank you.
That's my suggestion.
Thank you for that. Why don't we go ahead to user 2? That was a wonderful, I was trying to get the names of the shows that you talked about. Anybody from KPFK might list them in the chat for others. User 2, I think that's Serene. User 2, telephone, you've been waiting patiently.
Totally hard to understand. I hope I spoke clearly.
You did.
You did. If you can just put them in the chat, it would be really helpful.
I'm going to go to Napfra Freeman and then come back to user 2.
Margot, put yourself on mute, please.
Thank you for this. This is a great discussion. I'm the programmer at WPFW. We enjoy a little bit more flexibility with the programming on that. We don't have any pushback on that right now, so to speak. And my program in particular, Voices with Vision, and even just my background is staunchly anti-Zionist. I wanted to ask you, and this maybe even make it into a suggestion, Professor Abdulhadi, if this is not just for you, but for everyone. I'm very interested in how the term, the origins of the term anti-Semitic, which I, in terms of the linguistics of it, I'm a little bit familiar. I know it's not a creation of Zionism, but it's become synonymous with anti-Jewish and has been divorced from the root word of Semite, which includes Arab people, which include Palestinian people, and that if we could have some type of interstation program, Pacifica-wide program on just the linguistic stuff about it, which would expose, in my mind, we want to draw, because to me it makes fundamentally Zionism anti-Semitic, and that if we can draw these, and not to blame anyone who uses the term to mean only Jewish as being part of, to me the origins would expose this, just the plain fact about it, and that it's interesting that the origins of Zionism also are atheistic when it comes to who, the founder, Theodor Herzl, and all these kind of things. I think Bible history would expose some of it and would be very interesting to have a program on, if anyone particularly could speak to the origins of that word and how it's been divorced from Semite, which would not even be a religious thing, but would deal with like the ethnicities and the languages in that region.
Well, let me just say very briefly about anti-Semitism. Actually, if you speak to most people in the Arab world, they will object immediately, say, why are you saying this? Aren't we Semitic people too? And so there's a history of it. There is a lot of discussion. There is a lot of literature and in English as well, which is something that's really important to say, because actually it comes out of the language itself, Semitic languages. Semitic language are Arabic and Hebrew. I studied Hebrew in college, and there's a lot of words that are very similar to Arabic and so on. And it's also kind of like, you need to think about that Hebrew was revived in 1948 after Israel was founded. So there is a whole lot of history of the linguistic and so on that actually would be really great to have that discussion. This is not my specialty. I know something about it. I used to kind of like speak about, now I don't even say that, because the minute I start having discussions about whether it's about Semitism and so on, they say, see, you are anti-Semitic. So we have so many battles to fight, and there is so many sound bites that you can get in. So there isn't enough time. I mean, there is so much, every single thing I spoke about, we can detail everything more and more. That's one thing. But to talk about, I think the other point so I think, I'm in favor of it. But I think there are enough scholars who can speak. And I don't think, by the way, the US, people hear enough from people in the Arab world. So a lot of the times I'll read something that they say, this is the first time it's been done. And I'm like, no, that's not true. The history of Palestine, the literature in Palestine, the thinking about it. I mean, I learned all of this stuff about Zionism and so on, actually in Arabic when I was growing up. I read Frantz Fanon when I was in high school, because it was in one of the libraries. My mom gave me a library card when I was 8 years old, which was the best gift she's ever given me. And this is how I learned about all of this stuff. So when I came to the US and people will talk about Frantz Fanon and the Battle of Algiers and so on, this is how I know, I relate to that, because I learned this. A lot of people in the Arab world know this, and know this in multiple third world communities. The knowledge doesn't transfer. And this is part of the problem, is that the US is so isolated. We have to break through. And people think that the US controls the world. It tries, but it's very isolated. The state of knowledge in the US is very limited. And I think this is something that a lot of the time, maybe we need to tell people to get a little bit more humble. But, where do you start? How many things you want to say? So I think this is why we need to do more education. This is why we're actually take pride in our open classrooms, because we open the classrooms. And I was told by one of the deans that said to me, oh, classrooms are only for the students. I said, no, I don't. Yeah, I think all students. Students are not just the ones who are registered and pay tuition. Students are everybody who wants to learn. We continue learning until we die. But the other issue of it is really the roots of Zionism and colonialism. And what you said, yes, Zionism was actually started by Eastern European leftists, what they called themselves socialists, except that their socialism was colonialist at the expense of the Palestinians. And then they connected, and the only reason Zionism actually succeeded is because they connected with imperialist powers. Zionism would not have succeeded if it did not connect with the US imperialist power, with the British imperialist power, with the French, and so on. That's what enabled Zionism to continue. And then a lot of people say, for example, that Palestinians are victims of the victims, and I always argue against it, because it wasn't really the people who survived the Holocaust who came and oppressed the Palestinians. This is not true. The people who survived the Holocaust were used by the Zionist movement the way that Palestinians have been oppressed as well. The United States and European powers closed the door to Jews who were escaping the Holocaust so they can actually survive. So they had no other choice but to go to Palestine, because Palestine was controlled by the British under British under-colonialism, and that's the only place they could go freely. And they weren't intending to go and oppress the Palestinians or colonize their land. They wanted to be saved. So I think this is one of the misnomers that we really need to educate around a lot. The Zionist colonialist connections as well. And also, I think I would add one more thing, which actually speaks to what you were saying, PK, about the whole question about the whole racism, the racial map within Israel, that it's actually majority of people in Israel, Jewish people in Israel, are actually Sephardic, Mizrahi, come from Arab or third world countries or former Spain and so on. There is a growing number of Ethiopians. There is a growing number of African asylum seekers and so on. Go look at it and see what's going on. Israel says we're going to rescue the people from Ethiopia, Ethiopian Jews, and then they call them not real Jews when they bring it in. And then they actually even beat up and kill a soldier, Israeli soldier, not a friend of the Palestinian, Ethiopian, in the military uniform. I mean, the racism is so big that people don't even know about this, not to mention what's happening to Palestine, to Afro-Palestinians and so on. Okay, they're part of the Palestine. So all of this stuff is not known. And I think it's really important to make it known because it's not really about Jewishness. This is about Israel as a settler colonial regime, exactly like people who protested against South Africa. When they didn't want to have death to all white people, they were against the white minority control of this vast country of majority of African people in it. That was the problem with apartheid in South Africa. So I think if we say that, when you say you are against apartheid in South Africa, you say you're against white supremacy, it doesn't mean you're against every single white person. Definitely you're not against white workers. Definitely you're not against white imperialists. You're against a particular system that empowers a particular people based on superiority over other people, and that is wrong. However you want to turn it around, it's wrong. And I think this is something that we need to educate around more and more. And the Zionist movement keeps trying to do it again and again in order for them to deflect from what the issues are. The issues are colonialism, racism, occupation, apartheid, exploitation. This is what it's all about. Whether it's Israel, whether it is Modi whether it's the Philippines, is Modi, is Bolsonaro, it's the same. I mean, they're all practicing the same thing. They're all wrong. Each one of them is wrong, no matter how you turn it around. So this is, I think this is really when we talk about the indivisibility of justice, this is what really we should really be emphasizing again and again.
And we're going to have to put a stop there. It's 7:01 and it's time for the second part of this. But I want to say thank you. I want to come and have dinner with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you
all so much. I will talk to my comrades Florence and Polina. We want to go into the second part of it. We have a presentation that's less than about 3 minutes. Polina, will you do it, or do you want me to do it from my computer?
Well, first of all, PK, I just want to comment that because the electricity has gone out completely here where I am. That's why you can't see me. I'm not sure how well I'll be able to do it, given that I'm on my phone. My computer is out of power, so maybe you can do it now. Yeah, I just wanted to make a very, very brief comment to connect what we just heard from Rabab Abdulhadi. Has everything to do with Pacifica Radio. Pacifica's Lou Hill founded this foundation on the idea that we are supposed to contribute to the understanding of conflicts between among nations and among groups and among people, to contribute to a peaceful world. And that's what we're doing. That's why we're so thankful to you, Rabab Abdulhadi. Thank you again. Big applause. Thank you. I think it was a great conversation. Go ahead if you can, PK. Because I won't be able to do it from my phone. I cannot do it from my computer because I'm not connected to the internet.
Okay.
Because I don't have internet. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
I just want to say that it is Eric. We keep losing you, Eric. You're screen sharing, so you get to. I want to make sure that I can share.
Excuse me, are a few of the public going to be able to have their say?
Yes, who said that?
This is Dr. Halley. I'm wondering if a few more of the public would be able to have their say.
In the second half.
We have to go into the second half. I'm sorry.
There's another full hour in the second half.
Okay, I want to make sure you can hear it.
I put my hand up a half an hour ago. I don't know, or an hour ago.
Can you hear that?
KPFA.
Yes.
You can?
Yes.
All right. I want to apologize if I didn't get to you. Time ran out. My apologies.
Thank you.
KPFA Berkeley, waking up.
WPFW, Washington, D.C., waking up.
WBAI, New York City, waking up. Waking up.
KPFK Los Angeles, waking up.
KPFT Houston, waking up. Wake up, everybody, no more bowing your head. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. Pacifica changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much lying for all the world to see. Wake up with your microphone, send truth out over airwaves. Cause it's suffering, don't leave Pacifica in the hand. Straining airways with the voice, tell truth the very best that I can. Pacifica won't get no better as new day destroys democracy. But when you take up on the truth, we can end their of hypocrisy. Wake up all the listeners, make listening people well. They're the ones who suffer and who catch all the hell. And we don't have very long before Judgment Day. So won't you build our station back before they pass away? Oh, wake up all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it if we all lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our mind. Surely things will work out, they do every time. Pacifica won't get no better if we just let it be. Pacifica won't get no better. We gotta change it back, yeah, for you and me. Wake up, I said wake up, I said wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, I said wake up, I said wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, I said wake up, I said wake up, wake up, wake up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that we thought about creating getting somebody who sang like Teddy Pendergrass, but we couldn't find them. But you know how you wake up and you get in the shower and you're singing that song that you like? I think that this was a true representation of people who are waking up. And I am hoping that our 5 stations can individually work to wake people up, but work people up as part of Pacifica, not along with the 5 stations, but the almost 200 affiliates. We need a place for our voices and our music, that, you know, and our commitment to ending racism, ending hatred, ending bigotry. I just want to say this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence so that we can get on this discussion that everybody talked about that they were waiting for when we first got on. What we really need more than anything, and I'll say this to you, Professor, is what's happening in South Africa and in parts of America, like in Mississippi. We need a truth and reconciliation initiative because there's so many freaking lies and hypocrisy that we can't seem to find a common whatever, you know? And so that's the reason we do the first half as we are doing it. And we will continue to make that point for me as long as we are fighting back for justice. So that's my my 2 cents for tonight. Lawrence.
Thank you, Sister PK, and Professor. Thank you, and long live Palestina. Long live Palestina. Anyway, I know what it is to be an occupied nation. My little island of Puerto Rico has been occupied for over 500 years. So I know what that's like. Anyway, I'm not gonna stay on this thing too long. I think the next presentation is going to be by Michael. And what Pacifica Fightback is about is Pacifica Fightback is about keeping the network intact, not breaking it off in pieces, not having the fire sale in regards to our assets. We are about keeping the network intact as one network. And we are also about making Pacifica more relevant to those young people out there and to those people who are suffering a different reality and the realities that they are confronting today in regards to Pacifica. So Michael will deconstruct the efforts of New Day Pacifica, who is trying to break up the network, trying to disenfranchise our listeners, and trying to corporatize our democratic governance processes. Michael Novik, you have the floor.
Okay, yes, thank you. So just for people who might have tuned in late, my name is Michael Novik. I am a member of the local station board here at KPFK in Los Angeles. Second time I've been on the board. I was a member of the PNB briefly. I'm a retired school teacher here in LA. I was a shop steward for United Teachers Los Angeles, UTLA. And I'm a founder of Anti-Racist Action Los Angeles, edit and publish really 2 newspapers here locally, Change Links and Turning the Tide from Anti-Racist Action. And what I wanted to focus on, and I think a lot of people are interested in talking about, is the financial picture at Pacifica and its relationship to these struggles we've just been talking about, because it's critical. Pacifica is in fact failing. KPFK is certainly failing. It's unable to raise enough money from its listeners, which is the model that Pacifica invented of listener-sponsored radio. The Pacifica mission specifically talks about programming that is as self-sustained as possible. And because there have been gatekeepers installed, because there has been suppression of radical voices and community-based voices from community organizations that are involved in the kinds of struggles we've been talking about, anti-war struggles, racial justice struggles, environmental sustainability struggles, prison, police abolition struggles, solidarity, international solidarity, indigenous sovereignty. As those things have been pushed off the airwaves or into the corners of the programming on a lot of different stations, and particularly here at KPFK, our audience has begun to vanish. KPFK, for example, is down to 10,000 listeners in the most recent account that was taken by the National Election Supervisor. And that's down from 14,000 not that long ago. And at one point, KPFK by itself had more listener members than the entire foundation has at this point, over 40,000, not so many years ago. The question is not what topics are covered, but what's the content of those topics. And I think that increasingly, for example, in our morning drive time, most of the shows that we have on are nationally produced shows. The one show that's produced locally is Margaret Prescott's Sojourner Truth, which is on 4 days. And that show is also being pushed to be a nationally syndicated show, so that we've lost more and more in many areas of the local content. We used to have a locally produced morning magazine show that had local content to it. We don't have that anymore. We used to have a locally produced newscast on KPFK. We don't have that anymore. And so as the stations have gone towards what they call a professional model of somehow having these professional broadcasters and strip programs, we've lost our audience. And KPFK and a number of the other stations in the same boat, KPFK had 175 days of on-air fund drives last year. That's half a year. Listeners tune out. And a lot of the fund drives are not based on the actual programming that we're running, but they're based on fund drive specials that are, as even some of the people who support New Day have described that as snake oil. It's, self-improvement tapes and how to be how to unleash your inner millionaire, and rejuvenation creams and a lot of other stuff that, has no scientific basis in fact. And we think at Pacifica Fightback is that the content that's being suppressed and the audiences that we could attract would be by going back to the base that created Pacifica in the first place, which is a radical base. It's a base of people in, faith-based organizations that are committed to peace and justice. It's a base in community organizations that are, struggling for survival and beyond, for liberation. It's a base in the movements today. In Los Angeles, for example, I'm part of a number of organizations. I've worked with White People for Black Lives, for example, which is the t-shirt I'm wearing. And White People for Black Lives in the last several months has done orientation with about 5,000 people who are mostly people of European descent like myself, who are interested in all the issues we've been talking about today, and wanted an orientation to how to engage in a responsible way in racial justice work, recognizing Black liberation leadership and solidarity. 4,000 or 5,000 people went through their trainings, but those 4,000 or 5,000 people are not members, and probably not even listening, that many of them, to KPFK. Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles, has 5,000 dues-paying members. I doubt that a tenth of them are even aware of KPFK. Black Lives Matter is a mass organization in Los Angeles. And even though, we have a leader of Black Lives Matter on our airwaves on Beautiful Struggle, but it's on, on an evening, it's not the heart and soul of what we're broadcasting. And so the solution we see is that by engaging with all these movements, which are mass movements that are shaping history, making history, that will be the future, and certainly the Palestinian struggle is part of that. The, Jewish Voice for Peace is part of that. The Chicano-Mexicano struggle is part of that. The Puerto Rican independence struggle is part of that. The movement to abolish, prisons and the movement to abolish the police is part of that. And Pacifica Fightback is committed to the idea that anti-racism is at the center of a struggle for democracy in this society and within Pacifica. that self-criticism is a vital part of Pacifica and of any movement that's going to be able to win and sustain itself in the face of the kind of repression that's going on in this society. And that openness to that dialogue on the airwaves is critical. That we need to have on the air regularly reports, not just reports to the listeners, but dialogue with the listeners from the management, from the governance, and that the reason that the people in New Day Pacifica and its predecessor, Pacifica Restructuring Product, and its successor, Pacifica Safety Net, consistently are going after two things. One is they're going after democratic elected governance, and the idea that people will elect local station boards that have the right and prerogative to oversee management and to check in on the finances and how the money is being spent, and to engage in a review of the programming with the management to see what needs are not being met in the community. And the other thing that they're going after is the unity of the 5 stations and the unity between the 5 stations and the affiliates. And consistently, the forces on the other side of this struggle have opted for bankruptcy. They recently tried to get all of Pacifica put into receivership, where a private receiver would take over all the assets, the licenses, the operations, the bank accounts of Pacifica. And the reason for that is they want to do a triage. They want to cut away what they see as failing stations to support 1 or 2. And unfortunately, most of the stations at this point are in severe financial distress because we've lost our audience, because we've abandoned and failed that audience to stay current on all these topics and to engage with the younger people who are, not just to let them on the air once in a while, but to give them voice on the air. So I think the last piece of what they've been pushing consistently, and it's very blatant in this current bylaws transformation they're pushing, is they want to drive a wedge between the paid and the unpaid staff. They want to say that the unpaid staff, the volunteers, the community-based programming is somehow a threat to the paid staff and need to be considered second-class citizens. So this new bylaws referendum specifically creates a 3rd class of membership, permanently separating the paid and the unpaid staff from each other, and giving a greater weight to the paid staff and slashing all staff representation, but particularly the representation of the unpaid staff that are the lifeblood of the stations. So basically what we're saying is that the link between the politics and the finances is clear. As they've cut out the political representation of community voices, their membership has declined, and that's created the financial crisis. It's not a matter of the loan was taken out to pay off the Empire State Realty Trust, because that's been extended. The main problem now is the inability to raise funds from the programming we have to sustain the stations. And so at KPFK, that means we have to cut expenses and we have to rebuild our audience. And I think that's true at the other stations as well, about rebuilding the audience. Most of the other stations operate much leaner than KPFK does. We have probably 3 or 4 times the staff that BAI or KPFT or WPFW have. And we need to learn to live within our means, and we need to rely on the people, therefore, to build up our means and to bring in the content that will attract people that can sustain the programming that they want to hear. So I'll leave it at that. I think that we really want to get to the voices of the people who called in and have things to say and have questions to ask.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. And I just want to add to that before I go to the first person on the stack. I just also want to add to that we need to hit the refresh button, right, in regards to programming, because there was a report out that just came out on the amount of listeners that the network has, and we are losing listeners at a very alarming rate. And if the programming was relevant, then I believe that wouldn't be the case. So I'm gonna go to the first person that has the raised hand. It's a telephone number 0709. You are muted. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, greetings all. This is Andrew Weiss in Southern California area, KPFK listener, member. A couple of decades, have volunteered at fund drives as food coordinator. I appreciate this forum and those who are putting on. I think this is really key to addressing our situation at Pacifica is informing ourselves, communicating with each other. And I think that is what's lacking at KPFK specifically and Pacifica in general, that as fascists do, we've been divided and we're being shut down and we're being left into the dark about what's going on. And so we need to address that by opening up the communication both on the airwaves and off the airwaves as we're doing right now. First thing I think we need to do is to open up the airwaves to the listeners and communication amongst listeners and with the staff and management so we can find out what's going on at our stations and we can hold them accountable and give our feedback. We need monthly or better still weekly dialogues. A program once a week would be great, or at least once a month, that is devoted to the listeners to discuss things about what's going on at our station. And then we also need that as far as communication amongst the different stations, the network as a whole, so we can communicate, the 5 stations and the affiliates can communicate with each other, and we can communicate with the Pacifica National Board as well as the Pacifica management itself. I've taken upon myself to address this by forming a listener coalition, that we can do this on our own while we try and get it done on the airwaves. And that is called the Pacifica Listener Coalition. And if anyone is interested or would like to participate, it's open to all listeners of Pacifica. And you can email me. Again, my name is Andrew Weiss, and the email address is Pacifica Listeners with an S at the end, pacificalisteners@gmail.com. And we will be holding weekly forums such as this, that the listeners can discuss what's going on at our station, communicate with each other, find solutions, and contribute to helping out our station. And we will invite staff and management onto these calls, as well as members of our local station boards, to interact with the listeners. And we will help to get this done at all 5 stations, member stations.
Thank you,
Thank you for the time.
Thank you,
Let me ask you a question. Did you say your last name is Weiss? W-E-I-S-S?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And if I may real quickly give my background for people to know, I am formerly helped run the Office of Rainforest Action Network in Los Angeles for 4 years. I was the outreach coordinator. I've worked with Greenpeace as well. And lastly, locally, I worked on the campaign to turn the Ballena wetlands ecosystem into a state wildlife preserve and shut down
Andrew. Okay, Andrew. We got it. Thank you for all that great work.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
So I got Ruth, I got Esther, I got Paulina, and then I have Cheryl. Ruth, you have the floor. Please try to take 2 minutes.
Could I just say briefly, I put Andrew's email in the chat.
Okay. Ruth?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that I think that some of the programs that are on in the morning probably are good fundraisers. It would be hard for me to believe that, Amy Goodman didn't raise much money, Margaret Prescott didn't, Tom Hartman, etc. So I think that before we ditch strip programming, perhaps we ought to do an analysis of what programs are raising money for the stations. And I know we probably don't have the funds to do a Nielsen, but somehow to learn what the listenership is to various programs. Because I've been a member for 30 years, been a supporter, and I find it hard to believe that some of these programs are not helpful to the station. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Esther, Cheryl, Paulina.
Hi.
Esther.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's my first time participating on the meeting, and I'm happy to, participate. I wanted to get an idea of where things are in terms of the referendum or this petition that I see circulated by New Day Pacifica, and whether it's a given now that this will actually happen, and that Pacifica has to shell out more money to accommodate this new effort. And so that's one thing. The other thing, just as a longtime unpaid programmer whose show is carried on about, I guess, more than 24 stations now, I guess I got really upset about one of the email put out by New Day Pacifica, and it said from the staff of Pacifica. And as far as I understand, the unpaid staff is the staff of Pacifica. And I've been interested in a while for the unpaid staff across stations and across maybe even affiliates to become a part of some type of union effort. I tried to find out at some point the stations that did have a union for the unpaid staff. I tried to find out more about it, and I wasn't successful. But I think that this would be one way to break down the silos and to have the unpaid staff programmers to come together to overcome this effort that is from what I can see, a lot of people who are paid and feeling like they have some type of agency or privilege over saying how things go. I even heard a comment from one of the paid people at my station in DC about that on an email about, oh, well, how will this affect our salaries and it was just so upsetting to me and such BS. So I don't, this may not be the time to really deal with this, but I just want to say that is something I'm really interested in and concerned about in terms of the true workers and the labor that's really powering Pacifica coming together and having a voice, and not these people who feel like they are privileged to act for the rest of us.
Thank you, Esther. So I'll just jump in right away. In order for an amendment or a petition to become a referendum or a bylaw, it has to be received by the secretary of the Pacifica National Board. And we have not received anything yet. So I don't know if anybody, just so you know. Okay, so I got Paulina, then I have Cheryl. Paulina?
Great, thank you. By the way, if
hold on. Oh, Bella, okay. Go ahead, Paulina.
Dr. Halley's supposed to be in the staff.
I cannot raise my
I got you, Bella. I got you. All right, so Paulina, I'm gonna go to Dr. Halley because he was a carryover from the previous session. Is that okay with you? Then I'll
yeah,
go to
except that my comment will be brief and it goes straight to what Esther just said. If possible, I'll take about 50 seconds, if possible, and then I'll see
Is that okay,
Dr.
Doc?
Halley. Is that okay, Lawrence? Doc, is that okay?
And then we'll go right to you, Doc. Go ahead.
Can you wait one more minute?
Go ahead, Paulina.
Yes.
Okay, great. Esther, thank you for joining us. Talking about the union effort, the effort to unionize staff, both paid and unpaid, I think is wonderful. It's very important to also note that I've heard from paid staff at KPFK, who will remain unnamed, that some of them feel pressured by management to actually sign letters supposed, supporting the whole effort to basically to say, well, you guys are gonna fire the GM and you're gonna get rid of Ian Masters and Sonali, which is actually completely false. And so, yeah, I've heard from unpaid staff and paid staff specifically, that they feel pressured because they're afraid that they might lose their jobs if they were not to sign that letter, even if they know that it's propaganda. And so this is a problem. Now, money is being spent on the bylaws amendments, whereas we, as members of the local boards and the national board, and none of us are against bylaws revisions. We just want to do it in a way that's not going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, like the last referendum did. And finally, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Dr. Haley, and then Cheryl, Bella, and Nestor. Are you trying to get on the stack, Nestor? Nestor Vicente, are you trying to get on the stack?
Yes, I'm trying to get it.
You go after Bella, okay?
Okay.
Okay, and then Fred. I see you, Fred. Okay, Dr. Haley, you have 2 minutes.
Nifty, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm Dr. Thomas Halley. I've been a listener and a volunteer with some little breaks here and there from the late 60s. And before I go on, let me say that originally I was just amazed by the terrific collaborative and experimental atmosphere we had. It's just like, wow, this place is the place. Now, many of us have been baffled and frankly disgusted by a pattern of Pacifica Radio and KPFK leadership, or I think better would maybe be to say, well, leadership or management style of long standing. A few bullet points. I would mention a top-down management style.
Hold on 1 second. Andrew, you need to mute yourself, please. Go ahead, Dr. Haley.
We're talking a top-down management style. We're talking about decided lack of accountability and transparency. We're talking about absolute financial incompetence. I really want to underline that, including a refusal to make necessary cuts, and to financially get us on get our financial house in order. We definitely are like a sinking boat and have been for quite some time now. By the way, I'm about 95% in agreement with Michael, but I will say that I think it's absolutely essential, among other things, to handle stations like WBAI that have been like, well, like a money pit, like the money going down the drain. It's impossible. Okay, what we do receive from management is plenty of lies and lies and promises and never-ending fund drives. I'm sure all of you are aware that lately it's just an amazing amount. I mean, it used to be something like 2 fund drives a year for a couple of weeks a pop, which was pretty easy to swallow. But now it's almost every day of the year, and a lot of the snake oil garbage stuff. I will say, just in passing, to refresh your memory, I do happen to be a holistic practitioner, but there is stuff that's alternative and experimental that has some kind of basis, okay? At the very least, some good clinical data. But a lot of the stuff we get in the fund drives, in my experience, is just awful stuff. It's like new age, silly stuff. People talking out of their you-know-what. They really don't know what they're talking about. And I think it is driving away a lot of our listeners, and I think it gives us a terrible reputation. So let me see here. Lies, never-ending fund drives, and 1 second here. Oh, and finally, there are many aspects of this, but I've hit some big ones, I think. Also, a number of programmers who seem to believe that they own their programs and own their airtime. I think this is absolutely insupportable. We need to go back to an essentially volunteer model. We need terrific, absolute accountability. We need to make these huge cuts to get things back. Things are running in a feasible, doable way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I got Cheryl, Bella, Nestor, Fred, and Rachel. Go ahead, Cheryl. You have the floor.
Hi, I'm a long time listener from when I lived in DC, but I now live in North Carolina. But I've continued to be a member of the station and support WPFW in Washington. And I have two, actually 3 questions, but I won't ask all of them. I'm hearing people offer a lot of reasons why the station is a sinking ship. One, you're losing your listeners, and two, you lack the funding. And and people have offered a lot of reasons for why the listeners are leaving. I'm wondering how much of your analysis is data driven and how much of it is just the opinions of why people think people are leaving. Because without a correct analysis of why people are leaving, we're not gonna come up with the right solution. So I'm just wondering, where's this information coming from about why people are leaving?
Okay, thank you for that. I'm gonna go to the stack, and if I have time, I'll try to answer your question. Bella, Nestor, Fred, and Rachel. Bella, you have the floor. 2 minutes, please. Bella.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good. I want to thank Dr. Haley. I want to thank you, Lawrence, and Michael, and PK, and everyone that meets here regularly. You've heard me say many things. Michael repeated what I have been promoting for many years, is that in more recent time, I have been a bookkeeper of many years here at KPFK. I have been involved with the Finance Committee. Today, I apologize, I joined very late. I've been very busy. I created a spreadsheet going back to 2007, showing how the disparity, to highlight exactly how the station KPFK has been seemingly on paper, surviving, but surviving above its needs. And what I did was I took all the personnel costs against gross revenue. I did not even bother with the other expenditures, because once you look at what is left, then you know that you have a sinking ship. Then I put a percentage on under each year. I circulated that wide, and people began to understand. And today is why we have a demand from the national that we have to reduce our expenditures by 30%. But I insist that it has to be 70%. 30% is not going to get us to where we want to get to. And I hear protest what Paulina and what some of you as directors and at my local station board continue to attest that we are not getting rid of some of these on-air personalities that continue to violate and denigrate the Pacifica Foundation and its mission on a daily basis. Because if we ignore this, then we do not deserve to be here. If we are not fighting for long-term reclaiming of our mission and survival and returning to a volunteer format as the foundation was founded, then we have no business being here. So my demands are that we get rid of this, that we do what we need to do. Tomorrow we have to take a very important vote on the general manager and proceed from there to clean our house, bring our house in order, so that then we can reshape our programming. The question from this lady just now, if we have actual data, why we are losing listeners. Yes, our membership has drastically been reduced. Why? Because our station has been converted into a home shopping network. And many of you have heard me say this again. For years, I have been saying this, and very few or no one was hearing. And now people are saying it again. A home shopping network is not the format our mission calls for. Our mission is of information, education with a volunteer format, so that all volunteers are regarded equal, not that a handful of paid staff that demand a huge salary according to our means with union contracts consider themselves embedded and grandfathered with like a nobility, right? And thereby bringing about division on our station and disregarding our mission. This is not what Pacifica is for. So let's walk the same path together, right? So that we can get our foundation in order and bring it to where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bella. Okay, so
Okay, this is Nestor.
I have hold on, please. Hold on, Nestor.
Oh.
You're next. I got Nestor, Fred, C, Rachel, PK, 0424, and Paulina. Nestor, you have the floor for 2 minutes, please.
Okay, I'm going to try to be in 1 minute. Very briefly, is two ideas that I always try to communicate to the people when I donate. And now I trying to, I didn't donate too much this year, and I just don't ignore these people, okay? I just donate. But I was trying to tell them that we have to have more connectivity. The way to connect each other, because in that way we feel that we are running the station, should be every 3 or 4 neighbor cities, we can get meetings once a month or twice a month, and we can fit to the board or to somebody with another city. Later, maybe we can do another master meeting with another cities, and that way we can go to the board and communicate the wish of the people. Another thing, how to raise funds and to promote our station. Go to the SWAT meet, okay? Go to the SWAT meet with the table, KPFK, maybe showing the interesting things that KPFK, how long was founded, and all these things. Okay, this is all, guys. See, maybe you get it, this idea, okay?
Thank you, Nestor. Thank you for your comment. Fred C. And then we'll have Rachel, PK, 0424, Paulina. Go ahead, Fred C.
Okay, I've written in the chat most of the details here, but I'll say it out loud because I'm interested in getting people's feedback. I really agree that bringing the programming up from the grassroots, emphasizing volunteer staff is really important. I appreciate the stuff that the professionals do, but if we can't afford it, I don't want the ship to sink because of the aristocracy, let's say. What my background is besides media production is also education and training. And as I have thought about education and training, it seems to have 3 components that are needed. One is technical. Another is how to honor the intersectionality of Pacifica's mission. And the third is, so the technical and the people from the grassroots have to have their authentic voice. They have to speak in a way that people in their own community can really identify with and say, yes, that's our voice. But the third thing is they also have to have an aesthetic that can welcome a diverse audience. And I think that process of training people up who are grassroots leaders to be able to make those kinds of programs, that's what I think needs to happen. I'd love to work on that. I don't know if the apprenticeship program at KPFA is excellent, but it's tiny relative to what's needed. The other thing, as a community advisory board member, I have felt frustrated at not getting demographic information about who really is there in our service area, what their needs are. And I think that a number of the shows on KPFA have done a good job in making a space for voices from the community. I think Onda Bajita has done a great job with that. I think there are a number of other shows. The Hard Knock Radio has done a good job with that, of bringing in people from the community, not just as people to be interviewed, but also as producers. And I'd like to offer that as a model, that we don't have to get rid of strip programming entirely, but it's got to be permeable. Okay.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for your cogent remarks. I have Rachel, PK, 0424, Paulina, and VP. Let's see if we could get everybody in. Rachel, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Uh-huh.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I have basically two questions. I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm just throwing these questions out into the air, as it were. I'm curious to know if when New York City shut down, when the virus first started, the engineers at BAI were set up to work remotely, and about, let's see, we went back to work March. I went back to work March. Around April, I think, the IPD insisted that the engineers work at BAI because her reasoning for that was that that way producers could take listener calls. And she was concerned about listeners being able to call and express their anxiety and all that stuff about the virus. So since the engineers have been back, which is like 3 or 4 months now, the producers are not taking any more listener calls than they were before the pandemic. So my question is, does anyone know if it's against the mission of Pacifica to not take listener calls on a regular for more community-oriented programming, because it is, after all, a community radio network? And I think I had another question to throw out there. Now I'm forgetting what it is, but let me try to think real quick. Oh, I remember. So there are 3 or 4 African-American programmers who are in a strip Mondays through Thursdays from 3 to 4, I believe it is. And before the IPD got to BAI, each of those producers was given 2 hours each so that they could have enough content and enough time to take listener calls about any topic that it was. So they've all been cut down to an hour. And since they're all African-American and there's one indigenous producer, I construe that as racism. I'm white. I don't know if anyone else on this call is construes it as white, but I just wanted to put that in the air.
Okay.
As I said, I think everyone should be aware of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm done.
Appreciate
Thank
your remarks. You have my email and you have my number. If you want to ask me those questions offline. So I got PK. PK, you have the floor.
This is a perfect opportunity to bring up one of the things that somebody said. Where are the analyses? I'll tell you where one of the analyses is, because I will put it in the chat. In 2019, I did a town hall meeting, and well, the first thing we did was we created a community advisory board, which had died a while ago. I mean, people were fighting. They didn't want to let certain people be on the community advisory board. I'm well known in the community. I went and got people. My sister, who worked at NASA, young people, old people, straight, gay people. I mean, the community advisory board was kicking. And we did a town hall meeting. The first thing that happened was somebody called the place that I had gotten and told them that it wasn't going to, that I didn't want it anymore. And they canceled my town hall meeting 3 days before the town hall meeting. And like I said, I'm part of the community. I got a big historical Black church to give me a space. And while we didn't end up with the 70 plus people that registered, we had almost 50. And they did a 4-hour town hall meeting where they sat at tables and answered questions. That report is on kpftcommunityadvisoryboard.org. Read the material. Every station needs to get its community advisory board up and running and that's how you can get the community voices. That's how you can find a way to get what people want in the community. Here's my problem. I am sabotaged, lied on, You name it, they try to do it to me. And what they don't realize is that it is not the PK show, it is the community group. They are thinkers. And if you would do that at your stations, I think you can encourage people to give more money. The problem, as I said, is that these other people in New Day do not fight fair. They cheat, they lie. And I think we just ought to be truthful about it.
Thank you, PK. Thank you for your remarks. Okay, so this is the stack I have left. I got 0424, Paulina, VP, and Kim. And then I think we're probably going to be out of time. So let's exhaust that stack. Caller 0424, you have the floor. You're muted. Caller 0424, you have the floor. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Paulina, you have the floor.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I'm unmuted now.
Oh, yes, you are. Okay, good. Go ahead.
I just want you to know that I am just merely a listener, but I have given lots of money to KPFK for several years. And only thing I care about is to listen to any program I choose to listen to, and to have the general manager continue to keep his job, to have Ian Masters continue to keep his job, to have Sonali Kohartner continue to keep her job. And then, of course, there are several other people who are volunteers I'm happy to listen to. But if I don't have the top three, then I'm not interested. And I listen to KPCC as well. I have given them zero. I have given all of the money. When they want money, I give it to you guys. If you guys are not going to go ahead and make sure that the board are the people that try to bring money in here, instead of our continuing to have to come up with some money each time, which I try to do. But I am kind of sick of everybody talking about how they've got to protect their little territory. And so that's all I have to say. And I will be gone if you guys do what you plan to do, or you claim you're going to do. And that's getting rid of the general manager, getting rid of Ian, and getting rid of Sonali. Goodbye.
Thank you. So I just want to tell you those are lies and misinformation. That's not going to happen. Paulina, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would like to go back to what the previous caller mentioned about data-driven decisions. Who has the data? For instance, we back when the day when we were actually subscribed to the Nielsen's ratings, right, the Arbitron. Now we had a hard time as board members getting the data in our hands. We were being told, or as programmers, myself, I'm a volunteer programmer on several shows, and I'm also a volunteer programmer for a national show. We were having a hard time getting the ratings from from management. So who has the data? It's management, who is then responsible for analyzing, processing that data, and coming up with solutions that will raise money. It's management. It cannot be the board. The board doesn't have the data. We don't have the data on our hands. So now, of course, we will, all of us donate. We all, many of us organize, events that will raise funds, but specifically data-driven decisions, absolutely. Management, please communicate with us better. Now, next, how can programmers, for instance, support the idea of producing shows that will allow listener call-ins? You need, in order to do good radio, you have to have good production. You can't just start a show and then open up the lines. You need producers that know how to make it work, make it flow, and make it into good radio. And I'm sure that there are many volunteer staffs staff, myself included, that will be willing to support it on the sidelines. So once again, management, please reach out to us. And apprenticeship program. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hold on. VP, you're next. VP, you are next. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself, VP. Thank you. Go ahead, Paulina. Finish up, please.
Yes, the apprenticeship program at KPFA is wonderful. It should be across the network. Okay. Now, finally, we need demographic studies of our signal areas. All of us need that. We need definitely permeable strip programming, as the other caller mentioned. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so PK, I'm gonna take the facilitator's prerogative, and I'm gonna extend this meeting for 15 minutes because I want to get to the stack. I want to give the people the voice to be heard. So we got VP, we have Kim, we have Grace, we have 0222. So VP, you have the floor. Go ahead, VP. You're not being heard. VP, I'm gonna give you one more shot. You're not muted, so just
There's
speak.
some kind of feedback loop from VP.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll move on.
Can y'all hear me?
All right, we can hear you now. We can hear you now. Go ahead, VP.
Sorry about that. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, this is V. Patel Adams. I'm on the local station board at KPFT. Firstly, I just really want to encourage any other young folks of color on this call to speak up and express your ideas, because I just, as someone under the age of 40, there's just not many of us. And so please speak up and share your ideas. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Also, people keep mentioning about like the numbers. Where's the numbers to prove what you're saying? And I've been on the board for a little bit over 5 years now. And part of the reason, at least at KPFT in Houston, we don't have any numbers except for what PK mentioned, the CAB report, is because Houston is a very diverse city, and any effort to point out how white the board and the station is are shut down and have been for years. And it does look like sabotage, and I believe that that's what it was at KPFT for a long time under Dwayne Bradley. Another thing that people in the chat are saying that they're surprised about certain people being, excuse me, about certain people being part of the New Day group. And I just want to point out, in the last 4 years since Trump has gotten elected, I personally have lost many friends that I've known, since I was a kid, because it turns out that they're racist, because people who are very racist are just emboldened these days to push their agendas and to spew their crap. And so, I feel like that is what it is when folks are surprised that, people that they used to have trust in are now part of New Day. That's because these people who are for the white supremacist system are much more emboldened now to do what they do. The last thing I want to say is that I do believe that having radical programming would increase listenership. And the 5 sister stations are in major cities. So, I really feel strongly that having radical programming is something that could be very popular in Houston, LA, especially LA and Berkeley and New York City and DC. I feel like Houston would be the hardest one of those. And I think that it's definitely possible here. And furthermore, it's part of the Pacifica mission for us to have radical programming for the people. And it is also our duty as anti-racists and as activists to have radical programming. I really believe very firmly in that. It is about the numbers, yes, but furthermore, like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? Let's remember that. Because if we're doing like an NPR thing, then let's just get on board with NPR. Thank you.
Thank you, Venetia.
Here, here.
I appreciate it. I have I have an additional person on the stack. We're going to Kim. Kim, you have the floor. Does user number 2 want to get on the stack? I'll call in user number 2 want to get on the stack. Go ahead, Kim. You have the floor.
Lawrence, unless there's some other Kim, I didn't ask to be put on the stack, but I thank you. I really have nothing to say. I'm just
Okay. I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
about that. I thought you.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know what I saw. Okay.
Well, you know, often I do speak up, but I'm just listening. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Grace, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lawrence. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to say that KPFK is in very, very serious financial trouble. We are running a shortfall of between 70 and 90,000 a month. According to Annual Fields himself in his latest general manager report, and this is a quote, "We closed our 2019-2020 fiscal year in September with a projected shortfall of $697,577. That means that in the last fiscal year, which ended at the end of September, KPFK was in the red by close to $700,000. This is untenable. KPFK has not been paying its central service payments, which means that there are $300,000 to $400,000 of bills at the national office that aren't being paid. We're not paying our accounting firm currently. This is putting us in jeopardy of losing our accounting firm, of having no network-wide financial reporting. It's putting our audits in jeopardy. In fact, according to Anita Sims, the shortfalls for December alone at KPFK were going to be at least $125,000 just for December. And she also said that KPFK will probably not be able to make its next payroll, and that the only place that funding can be found is going to be at KPFA. This is a really emergency situation, and on June 11th of 2020, the national board mandated that there be 30% cuts of expenses at KPFK. This has still not been fully complied with. Only between 200 and 250,000 or 300,000 in cuts have been already done. This is inadequate, woefully inadequate. And if these matters are not attended to very rapidly, it is going to potentially sink the whole network. It is illegal to have staff and not pay them. They have to be paid. And Sharon Adams, the treasurer of KPFA, has said a number of times in National Finance Committee calls that it's her opinion that if a station can't meet its bills, that it should be made into a repeater station, that all staff should be laid off, and programming should be piped in from the other stations until the network can right itself, basically. So she's of the opinion that any station that can't meet its bills, as I just said, should be made into a repeater station. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the potential shutdown entirely of KPFK.
Okay, thank you, Grace. Sum it up.
So this is the this situation can be rectified pretty easily because KPFK has about 49 staff. There's no necessity to lay off paid programmers at this time, and there's no necessity to lay off income-producing staff. There are plenty of staff. There are plenty of expense reductions that can be made without touching paid programmers or income producing staff at KPFK. So this situation can be ameliorated without really harming the station, and then the station can figure out how to bring in more income and how to further decrease expenses. But this is an emergency situation. I want to make it clear to everybody that this should be a priority for everyone across Pacifica, because if these shortfalls continue, we're looking at a real calamity. That's all.
Thank you, Grace.
I want to be heard before we close out. I
Okay,
want to.
Mela, I got you. I'll get to you. You'll be the last one on the stack, okay? Okay, I have other people ahead of you. 0222. And Esther, did you ask to be on the stack again, Esther?
Yes, if
Oh.
that's
Okay.
fine.
Go ahead. 02222.
Yes, this is Andrew Weiss. May I speak again briefly?
Let me get to people who haven't spoken yet, Andrew, if that's okay with you. Hold on.
Yes.
Noel?
I thought that this is Rosie. I thought that I had asked to be on the stack and somehow I'm not, but I wrote something on the side here.
Go ahead, Rosie. You haven't spoken. Go ahead.
Okay. I am someone who's been a 40-year listener, supporter. I came through the apprenticeship program at KPFA, and it was a training for women and people of color, and the idea was to bring them into broadcast journalism. It's a really good program. And at the time in the 90s when I was doing it, I was going through a lot of changes in my life and supporting a family and whatnot. And what I did notice in the 2-year program was all stuff with like understanding all the various parts of media. And then the second year you had an apprenticeship within the station where you chose to work. I was in program management and outreach. And what I noticed there at that time, although I do hear the listeners, the person who stated that strongly we needed to do cutbacks on paid staff, I think paid staff is important as well as unpaid staff. And what I saw with unpaid staff was there wasn't enough broad representation of people of color and women at that time. So, I went into another area instead because I had to take care of other things to be able to serve my family, and always have continued. I continued the anti-racist work I was doing, the broad multicultural stuff as a health educator and as an educator with children in San Francisco for over 20 years. And KPFA has always been a part of my learning more, and also be able to take the work that I was doing into communities and into the communities that I've served, diverse communities in San Francisco Bay Area. So I just think that, and at that time too, interestingly, was KPFA had just bought a building for the first time. They had always rented, and it was a big jump to make, to be able to go that way. And somehow money came up. They ended up selling the place on the corner, another piece of property there, to be able to pay for what seemed like a lot of money for the building. And then also in the 50th anniversary of KPFA and of Pacifica and stuff, I stood with others outside KPFA and supported and did the most writing of letters and calling Pacifica staff. And it was another time like now where letters where the Pacifica board at that time wanted to break up the station. Just KPFA alone, you can make 30 stations out of, as things went to fiber optics. So it was worth so much money to do that.
Sum it up, Rosie. I'm sorry.
All I need to say is that I do think we need a broad, creative way of looking at how to solve where things are right now. And thank you.
Thank you for your coaching comments. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next person that hasn't spoken. Noel, you have 1 minute, and then the people that are gonna speak for a second time, I'm gonna give you another minute, and then I want to give Michael the last word. Michael Novik. Go ahead, Noel.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just trying to figure out Zoom. Yeah, just kind of just really quickly, I am a longtime listener. However, in the past year, I think we as a community need to recognize that a lot less people with this pandemic and changing times, there's going to be a lot less people listening in the morning in your higher ratings. And just a quick note, I worked in the belly of the beast. I used to work at CBS Radio, actually the biggest probably news radio in Southern California, KNX 1070. I had numbers to Nielsen. I looked at KPFK. This is 3-4 years ago. So I think it's important to recognize just the adaptability that we need to accept as listeners, that even if it's your favorite program or programmer or story topics, there needs to be voices that are open to other parties, especially minority sectors that are ignored and just basically ignored. That speaks to African Americans, indigenous programming, Middle Eastern programming, African programming across the network. And we need to be open-minded as listeners, but still be supportive. And then I do agree with, the young lady speaking to topics about radicalization. That's a trigger word for a lot of just on the more conservative side. I think it's correct that she states that we do need different programming that attracts younger listeners, but also, again, keeping in mind that other topics, other subjects need to be spoken about that satisfies all listeners. So just in lieu of not taking too much time, that's pretty much my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Okay, so Esther, you have 1 minute, and then Bella has 1 minute, and then Michael Novik, you'll close us out. Is that okay, PK?
Andrew also, please, on the staff.
Oh, okay. So go ahead, Esther, 1 minute, Bella 1 minute, Andrew 1 minute, and then we'll go to Michael.
Okay, just things really
I'm
quickly.
sorry, could I get the stack too?
I just wanted
No,
to.
I'm gonna close the stack. I'm sorry, Doc.
Okay.
Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up about what plan there is in terms of, when I asked about the petition, you said it hadn't been presented to the secretary. So I just wanted to know if this group had any plans in the meantime in terms of countering it and countering what they're doing in the meantime. And I'm going to put in the chat, but radio is struggling all the way around. And there was a study either last year or the year before about how Generation Z is not even listening to the radio. They just have so many other formats to find music and programming. And I think as a programmer, I can see the difficulty that Pacifica has in moving to new formats. And there's the issue of, I know I had to start my own podcast because of the difficulties with the station maintaining the integrity of the podcast in terms of preemptions and stuff like that. Third, real quick, is that I know I want to talk to the people who ran Bernie Sanders' first campaign in terms of creating small donations, because we need to be able to tap people nationally who want to support something other than corporate media. And I think that audience exists. And I don't know if Pacifica's ever done that. And I wanted to say, I want to follow up with maybe Paulina or someone else about the whole union issue.
Okay,
Sure,
thank you.
sure.
Thank you. And I want to encourage people to go to pacificafightback.org, pacificafightback.org. And there's a telephone number with the announcement, and that number belongs to Michael Novik. If you want to communicate with me, Esther, I'll be more than happy to talk to you as well. Okay, so I got Bella for 1 minute, and then I have Andrew, and then we're gonna go back to Michael. Bella, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I disagree with Grace. We need a 70% cut at PFK so that we can save the foundation. I said this months ago. Is my contention that monies are stolen simply because you simply cannot operate a radio station of the caliber of KPFK, which has carried the foundation for so many years, and be able to survive, meaning monies have been funneled out by overstating expenses. And this is the reason why when I created the illustration of a very comprehensive worksheet going back to 2007 to date was to highlight the enormous upside down picture of KPFK financially. Whereas once you satisfy the personnel costs, there's nothing left. Now, of course, the only way to say that you are surviving is by taking in the funding and putting it somewhere else. Where is it going? I can tell you where it's been going. Why do you think we have a strong opposition? So, having said that, I want to go back to the lady and other people that keep saying radical. We don't have radical programming at our station, KPFK. What we have is brainwashed liberal garbage that has controlled our airwaves for years, until the only radical voices are in Spanish, and they only come in at night, and they're the ones that are the most preempted. So how do you like them apples? So in order for us to clean house, I mean clean house bottom up, is to eliminate the strip programs that control all our peak time and return them to 1 hour per week as everybody else. In the meantime, once you do that, you liberate our airwaves so that we can bring in the voices of the people, as we did, as we were years ago, when we only had to fundraise twice a year and we could raise $1 million in just 2 weeks, as Mr. Haley said. Thank you, Bella, signing out. If you want to reach me, I sent my email on the chat. And also Andrew.
Thank you, Bella. Andrew, you're the last one, and then we're going to go to Michael Novik.
Yes, Andrew Weiss, once again, one of the coordinators with the Pacifica Listener Coalition. We're a separate entity. We're formed by the listeners to inform ourselves, communicate with each other, and to communicate with the staff. So we need to continue these discussions, and we need to communicate our ideas to the staff and to the management. If you'd like to do this, please email us at pacificalisteners@gmail.com. We will keep you informed about doing monthly or maybe weekly ongoing discussions about ways to communicate with the staff and the management, about organizing town hall meetings in person, as one of the listeners wanted to do, and any other ideas that the listeners have. And so please, once again, the Pacifica Listener Coalition at pacificalisteners@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Michael Novik, please close this presentation. Michael?
Okay, yes, I wanted to thank everyone who stuck with us. We still have 65 people on the call. We had about 90, I think, on at least, maybe a little more coming and going. I think it's vital that you all get people to join your station immediately. The bylaws referendum is coming, and you have to be a member. I think we need to rebuild the base of the station, and the best way to do that is each one reach one. Connect with your friends, and even if they're currently not listening to the station, let them know that it's a democratic medium, and membership is what counts and will carry the day in the long run. I think that we need to rebuild friends of all of our stations and all of our listening areas. We need to work on that here at KPFK, Friends of KPFK. I know there are some groups in New York, WBAI, but the other stations need the same thing. We have in Los Angeles, we have a signal that reaches from Santa Barbara to San Diego, and KPCC, which is the NPR affiliate, would love to get its hands on it. If the breakers win this battle and chop Pacifica up, I can guarantee you that one of the things on the chopping block will be 90.7 FM in Los Angeles. They will sell it to KPCC in a heartbeat for the money they're willing to offer. So it's not only BAI or KPFT or PFW that's under threat. Every one of the stations is under threat, and we need to rebuild the base of listeners who can fight to protect this vital resource and restore its impact. It's not just that the station raised $1 million at a time, 3 times a year. KPFK built an anti-war coalition. The general manager of KPFA knocked heads at 3 or 4 different anti-war coalitions during the Iraq War and said, you have to form one coalition. And they did form a coalition of coalitions. They brought Answer and the RCP and all the rest of the groups together. KPFK raised money to save people's lives in New Orleans during that period of time. And that's what the stations could be doing right now if the management and the listeners and the governance could coalesce around the need to serve the community, and the community would respond. So I urge you all to get active. Don't just come on these calls, but participate in the committees, participate in rebuilding friends of your station, and getting people to sign up to vote down these New Day Pacifica bylaws replacements that will divide the staff permanently into separate classes and eliminate the voice of the unpaid staff that really produce most of the programming. So thank you again all for being on this call. And if you sign up for our outreach list, it's Pacifica Fightback at lists.riseup.net. If you go to riseup.net and look for Pacifica Fightback, you can join that. I'm saving the chat from this call and I will put it out on that list. You don't have to be a member of Fightback to join that list. And if you're interested in joining Fightback, then talk to someone who is already in it and we'll work on that. Thank you so much for your work tonight and for your ideas, and they'll all be taken into account. And I want to thank especially PK and Lawrence for, moderating through this, Paulina, and earlier Dr. Abdulhadi for her tremendous contributions to really deep political understanding of what's going on in this country. I do want to say that we should not underestimate the capacity of the national security state that Paulina mentioned, and of organized Zionist forces to try to destroy Pacifica at this time. The Democratic Party now has control of the White House and both houses of Congress. And in that circumstance, the Democrats would be happy to see Pacifica die. They do not want anything to the left of the Democratic Party. And so it's vital that we unite our forces and sustain this community-based radio network as a voice of free speech, of not just progressive politics, but anti-imperialist politics, decolonizing politics, solidarity with indigenous sovereignty politics. And,
Thank you, Brother Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Michael. But so before I go to PK, I always end my emails with Pacifica Forward as one network. PK, I'll turn it over to you to take us out. Thank you, PK.
Thank you so much, all of you. I want to tell you how much I'm honored by what we did tonight and staying on a path of justice and democracy. And this will be on our YouTube station and you'll be able to share with others. We can reach one, teach one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, BK. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
you,
Oh, by the
everybody.
way, we have
Happy New Year.
recorded this meeting. I need to say, mention that I didn't start recording until I got here, which was a little bit late. So we unfortunately missed the wonderful blessings. Yeah, we missed. I believe we may not have recorded either sister
So what was
Lydia
recording?
Ponce. Yeah, we may not have recorded that. I'm not sure because I don't think that was being recorded until I pressed the record button when I got on.
I saw recording was lit up at the beginning.
So,
great.
So I think it was recording.
Oh, so you were recording already? Because when I when I got
Yeah.
in, it said it wasn't. But in any case, whatever we managed to record will be shared with everybody. Thank you.
All right. I think what happened was that the electricity was lost and it went off on my part for a minute. So as soon as we got, so we might have missed 5 minutes.
Not a big deal. Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you. I think the rest of it is recorded online. We're good. Thank you very much.
Okay, muchas gracias.
Buenas noches. Gracias.
Gracias.
Somebody just came in.
We're leaving.
Yeah, we're leaving. Good night.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Tom. Bye.
Vámonos a comer.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you,
Great
Bella.
seeing you,
Thank
Tom.
you. Nancy Saibara Naritomi. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Stay well.
Bye. Arrivederci.
Same. Bye. Can I end the meeting now? Because I think I'm still moved.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because if I leave, I think I might end up ending it for everybody. Is it okay if I end it now?
You will. You'll end it for everybody. Anybody
But
who
I don't
wants
want.
to
I mean,
wait.
is that okay with you, or do you want me to just make you host and let you?
It's okay with me. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
everybody.
no, I just PK, I just made you host. So I mean, meaning I gave you back hosting.
Okay.
Yeah, and people are leaving anyways, but I'm gonna leave and let everybody else stick around if they want to. Bye.
Yeah.
PK,
Thank you
I'd like to get an email for you if you can give me one.
Yes, it's Perrymac. Perrimac.
MAC.
Yeah.
PERRIMAC.
At gmail.com. P is in
Gmail.
Paul.
Got
like
it.
Perry Mason, except with an I.
Got it. Thank you very much.
I say that to young people, they don't know who I'm talking about.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It's been very informative, and I appreciate getting the perspective from around the country.
Great.
And I look forward to talking further with you about Community Advisory Board. I feel like, I'm not sure why, but with the start of the pandemic, it's as though nothing was happening. And that doesn't make any sense to me. I wasn't able to get anywhere with the people I knew.
Go to KPFT communityadvisoryboard.org. Spell out
Okay.
communityadvisoryboard.org. I haven't updated it, but it's got all the stuff about the town hall meeting. But we've been meeting every month during this COVID time. We helped the other referendum fail in Houston. We do a lot
That's
lot of stuff in the background.
great.
So
Great.
let us know. And in the meantime, anytime.
Appreciate your leadership.
I know you want to see my pretty face here. I'll give you the kid's face again. You don't have to go home, but we got to get up out of here.
Right.
Yes, Bella.
PK, hi, sweetheart. PK, can you give that email you gave before about your email?
Yeah, my email, Perrymac, PERRIMAC @gmail.com.
I hear you. I could not hear you.
Here, I'll put it in the chat.
I can't see the chat at the time.
It's not. It's going to everyone. I don't care if everybody has it. Okay, can everybody see it now? Perrymac @gmail.com. Steve, I'm going to, as soon as this is saved, get this to you and Paulina so that we can do what we need to do with getting it up.
Thank you very much, PK.
You're very welcome. Okay, guys, I'm out of here.
Good night. Good night.